Hi, and welcome to Tremco Live, where we're socially distanced but technically connected. We're pretty excited to be able to join you every Friday, where we talk about industry challenges and how we can solve them, working holistically together. I am one of the hosts of Tremco Live, and I am joined by my co-host.
And I'm Paul Hugenbook, and I'm the president of the Tremco Construction Products Group, Marcy, a fine collection of companies and brands, systems, products, solutions all over the world.
All over the world. Very exciting stuff. We're really proud to be able to be here. As always, Paul, I appreciate being here together with you.
My favorite time of the week.
Exactly, and I hope it's yours too as we wind down your week together. As I mentioned, talking about industry challenges. Paul, I love getting together with you because we talk about these case studies, we talk about our systems and our solutions, and we like to call them unicorns.
It's one of my favorite words.
It is. It's one of your favorite words. So
mythological creatures that in theory don't exist.
Yeah.
And our goal is to bring them to life.
Exactly. So a lot of times the unicorn is a product, a system, or it might even be a person,
Yes.
depending on that skill set that they bring to the customer.
How to solve the unsolvable.
Yes, yes. So it's a great time to be able to be here and do that. As you know, Paul, this month we've been talking about glazing. So lots of different products related to glazing. There's lots of great YouTube videos as well on the Tremco YouTube channel, so you want to check those out. I think we featured several of them. We kicked off the month talking about the mall. So we did the Edmonton Mall.
Yeah. Snowing there today, probably.
Probably snowing there today. Yep. And then we talked about ProGlaze ETA and some projects last week. So that's another great unicorn, right? Solves a lot of different installation challenges there.
Yeah.
First one was Spectrum Simple Seal. And then we did a restoration overlay project as well. So it's pretty interesting to kind of look through that. So as always, we have a few slides prepared to kind of tell that story. And we also do have a guest, so we're excited about that opportunity as well as we start to talk about these solutions that we have here at Tremco. So as we look at this information and talk about glazing, I find it really interesting because we in this industry are always accustomed to looking around, right? We're looking at the sidewalk cracks, we're looking at the parking garage, we're looking at the exterior of our buildings. And in this month, we're all talking about those windows. And so here's some of those things we've mentioned over the last couple of weeks of what you see.
Those are great pictures, Marcy, and I do laugh because when you and I walk around, that's actually what we're looking for.
Exactly. I think I've said it before on a previous broadcast where I was at the museum with my daughter and I'm taking pictures of like the sealant joint instead of.
We're looking up the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Looking at that kind of thing. So this is what we're talking about, right? If you're seeing these kinds of things on buildings, we're pretty excited to be able to offer that solution.
The one on the bottom left, Marcy, the discoloration, that's one, of course, you can see the cracks and all that.
Yeah.
The one you and I know to look for too is discoloration, right? Which is two things, that we can get the customer improved aesthetics, literally refresh the building. And it's always a sign of some sort of deterioration going on.
Exactly, yeah. So aesthetically improvement, and then of course your air leakage and water damage will be eliminated as well. I always like to talk about the leakage we had here on our own windows when your blinds would move.
Yeah.
So
Literally.
they don't move anymore. We replaced the gaskets there and ProGlaze ETA actually.
Yeah.
And this is not pretty. We at Tremco, commercial sealants and waterproofing, love our sealants, but there's some better solutions than this. Our first episode, we talked all about that, about leak chasing. And a lot of times you don't know where that leak's happening.
Yeah.
So you just start putting a lot of sealant all over the place. There's a great video that talks all about wet sealing or gaskets.
Yeah.
And I think we'll be able to talk a little bit about that with our guests today as well, but there's some great information there. I think people out of the get-go think it's cheaper, right? If they're looking at the cost of a sealant, but they're not maybe thinking about everything that's related to that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was about to comment on, generally that's a more labor intensive approach. And really the things we'll talk about today, the labor is by far the biggest cost. And so if we can make things much more efficient and give it a long life, we've dramatically reduced the cost.
Absolutely. And I think in this case, in the case study we're looking at today, if there's additional repairs that were needed later, if you wet glazed it, you'd have to then get the rigging on the outside of the building, where now you can actually utilize the interior space if you needed to do any type of window replacement. So there's a lot of different advantages that we can talk about. But that's what's great. When you look at what we're looking at here is some of the information that we're going to be sharing with you at the end of our presentation today, but I wanted to give you a little teaser up front. So we are talking about the Bank of America project. Had to put Ken Krieger's picture up there because he is a key part of that market in Texas, and wealth of knowledge, one of those feet on the street with lots of expertise to help our customers.
Yeah, that's always a great point, right? The amount of expertise that somebody like Ken has that brings to each situation, each job is absolutely invaluable.
And just always there to help. I mean, the knowledge and just being willing to help is great. I know, shout out to him, he's in Houston right now. So thank you, Ken, for all that you do. So our project today, without going into too much detail, but we are talking to a representative from CDC. And this project was obviously a collaboration with our installer, Sunbelt. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So to round out the month of glazing, as this is our last Friday in September, can't believe it, episode 21, we wanted to be able to just kind of recap a couple things, right? So there's a lot that we can do when we look at that detailing around windows, and we have a lot of options, and I think that's the beauty of that capability. So really giving you the solution that you need for your project.
Yeah,
right?
And the ability to customize, right? We say that often, but we really have pretty much infinite control of the geometries that we work with. There's really nothing we can't solve to give you both the performance and, I think, equally important, the aesthetic.
Absolutely, and particularly in this case study we're going to talk about today was how critical the sizing needed to be of this replacement, right? Replacement gasket to make sure that we're not breaking glass, and we don't want it too loose, so it's going to leak still.
And a lot of times we're tweaking literally in the thousandths of an inch, or a fraction of a degree to get it just right, to not only make it right structurally, but also easy to install.
Yeah, right. It's that sweet spot to be able to get it to install and still perform. So lots of varied options, and that's a great part of the capability that we have here today. There's a little bug bothering me today. So when we look at restoration candidates, there's a lot of different things that we're looking at here. So we want to make sure that we identify, what is that issue? Is it a correction of something that was improperly installed, or is it due to aging components? And our project today is about aging components. 35 years old aging components of an installation that we did 35 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool history.
But 35 years that's good life.
Absolutely.
It's good life, but kind of brings you to where it's time to refresh.
Yeah. And the technology that was used then obviously was different than what the technologies we have today. So it's pretty interesting. And we've talked about it before, and we'll touch on it briefly, but that renewal of the aesthetics is huge. Obviously air and water tight, equally important, but then being able to do historic renovations is key too. So that gets into that customization of color, design, style.
Because it's very common that the owner wants a new look, right? Or an upgraded look as they're trying to maintain the value of their building, value of their rents.
Right.
So I always think the aesthetics are as important.
Yeah, occupancy, right? If you want to keep those occupants happy, they want air and water tight, and they want to improve the aesthetics at the same time.
Keep a Class A building, Class A.
Exactly. Yep. So once again, lots of different case studies that are available to review. But as you're looking around, you're going to see a variety of different technologies, different types of windows that are out there, and a lot of different substrates. And I think that's the beauty of what we have today. And this is just one piece of it. So as you think about the Tremco Construction Products Group, we've got you covered, right? We can talk about the walls. We can talk about the surfaces. So if you wanted to upgrade that exterior to some new look with the dry-bit material, obviously we've got your roof handled as well. All the different connection pieces, and we talked a little bit about that last week and the last couple of weeks about having those flexible transitions. So you have a candidate, bring it on over, and we'll take a look at it together. And what's great is what we talked about earlier, Paul, about those options that we do have here. So we've talked a lot about sealants. We've shown some pictures where they're challenging. You typically don't need to remove the window, but you have so much flexibility with color. And of course, the products we're using are good for exposure. So those are the indications that you can see there. And it's typically a standard solution, but as we've demonstrated before, depending on the scope, size of your project, you might not want to be leak chasing, which can happen with sealants.
Yeah, the whole concept of an overlay, I guess the expression you always use, glass to glass.
Mm-hmm.
And so often there's anywhere from 3 to maybe even 7 interfaces going on in there. It's just impossible to know where to go, right? And then your idea of leak chasing, I think a lot of people don't appreciate that just stack pressures alone can send moisture, water.
To who knows where, right?
I mean, literally 100 feet up. So you think you're in the right spot, you have no way of knowing.
Yeah, so when we go over to those other options, the pre-cured silicone and restoration overlay, that's where you're going glass to glass. So once again, you don't typically have to remove what's there. You're going to a new substrate now, the glass to glass, glass to metal, or glass to substrate. And you've got that whole encapsulation solution. And once again, we're excited about our new thermal environmental chamber. We're gonna be able to take a look at what that does to your thermal efficiency of your building when we're now encapsulating that metal.
And the other thing, whenever I see the word encapsulation, very common, you said 35 years, but when you get into that window that's 30 years or more out, often that material that's in there is considered hazardous. So the ability to encapsulate it is a very elegant solution. You can spend more on the hazardous material aspects of a project. Ultimately what the customer wants is a weather-tight building, but just the hazardous management alone can exceed the value.
Not only of the removal, right, and then where does it go, right?
So encapsulation is it's a pretty desirable thing.
And of course, depending on your situation, we can also replace the gaskets. And in this example here, it says that you have to remove the window, but you don't always have to. So just, I kept that yes in there for window removal. Our example today was about a solution where you didn't have to remove the windows and you didn't have to displace occupants.
I think there's a unicorn involved.
There's a unicorn involved there, right? Okay. You got it, Paul. So just further that whole idea of an evaluation. So this is really where we come into working together with our consultant partners, and that's a key part of it. The consultant that we're going to be talking about here in a few minutes has a great article that they just produced, and it's all about that role of that consultant. And it's very important for us here because as we start to look at solutions, especially if we're not replacing the glass, we need that consultant to be able to let us know, how are those interior seals doing? And that can be tested via the test method shown here. How's that weep system performing? Is it still structurally sound so that we can then just put up a solution that gets it back to being air and water tight? So that's where that partnership really comes into play.
You always talk about the Trinity.
Trinity, yep. That's another shout out to the Sealant Waterproofing and Restoration Institute, where I actually met. Well, actually, I met our guest today previously, but then we were at a meeting together. And it's just a great way to really give that whole effect of the installer, the applicator, the manufacturer, and that design professional to really give that customized solution. And this is one example where we really do show that these solutions can clean up the aesthetics, you're not going to have issues, and it doesn't affect your sightline at all. A couple other examples of that here. We always love to show this one, and this is that example, Paul, where you mentioned that glass to glass. So these are our pre-cured solutions that we have as an option. And I always love to share this one just because it's so dramatically different. So if you've seen this one before, I apologize. I just really love showing this one.
Yeah, and I know the bigger project this is on, it's not just the interior aesthetic and sight line. It's, in this case, there's a lot of rooms, a lot of people looking down on this.
Yeah.
And that's a lot nicer to look at it on the right than on the left.
Exactly. Yep. And of course, those types of customized solutions, when we are replacing the glass and we are putting in new gaskets and customizing it for color and design to make sure that we're getting that window placed in there in such a way with some glazing tape and sealant as well.
And that one's a cool project, Marcy, right? It's architecturally significant.
Yeah.
And we were able to maintain all of that architectural, all of that original material, if you will, other than, of course, what was failing.
Yeah.
On a building that was from the late 1800s.
Yeah.
So the ability to do that is pretty cool.
Yeah. Columbia Library.
Yeah.
And in this case, the putty that was used back in I think it was 1895, was just so rigid, right? It was never going to give that ability to the glass and the mullions to expand and contract. So unfortunately, it probably leaked very early on. And we were able to replace that with a great customized solution. So it looks good.
Well, and the aesthetics of that, again, that aesthetic really mimics the original putty look, of course, but done in a gasket.
Exactly. Yep. So with that, we would like to welcome our guests. So we led us up to this point to invite Brian Hake to the show. So Brian, could you please join us?
Hey, good afternoon, Paul, Marcy. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Brian.
Nice to have you today here. I'll turn off our slides for a few minutes just so we can say hi.
Yeah, hey.
How's it going in Dallas today?
Oh, it's going. It's a beautiful day out there.
Yep.
No rain, so no leaky buildings.
That's interesting, right? As soon as we start seeing those buckets come out, that gives us that opportunity to start looking at things.
We start getting the calls, say our building's leaking and how can you help? And that's kind of what we do at CDC. We're problem solvers. You know, we help where we can.
The benefit of that consultant, for sure, right? There was an article that you guys posted a few weeks ago, and I really think that really hits it home, right? To be able to partner, you know, together, your expertise compared with the manufacturer's expertise compared to that installer, right? So that whole Trinity effect Paul and I were mentioning, and of course a shout out to our friends at SWRI.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, kudos to, you mentioned Ken Krieger earlier, and I know on Bank of America, he was a key factor in getting everything squared away and what we needed to do.
We like our feet on the street, right, Paul?
That's what built our company, started 90 years ago. And
yeah,
that's the foundation today.
So, so Brian, I know we've worked together several times, and just, you know, we'd like this opportunity to engage with you guys from a virtual perspective because we don't know when we'll be seeing each other again in person. So is there anything that's been going on with your firm because of COVID that you guys are dealing with?
Well, you know, early on in March and April, it was kind of a, you know, knee jerk with everybody. I think that, okay, what are we going to do? What plans do we need to have in place? And for the most part, we've kept rolling. We had a period of time where folks were working from home. I continued to stay up here because with a wife that stayed home and I had a son that was living with us at the time and a dog and 2 cats. If I was going to get anything done.
Yeah.
So I continued to work up at the office, and we had a handful that did.
Yeah.
That didn't last too long. You know, we wanted to make sure with our folks in the field that they were staying safe. So we made sure early on to get them masks and get them safe in the environment, the new environment that was out there in the field.
Absolutely.
Back up to full strength. We've been back up for a couple months now, full strength here in the office.
Well, good. We look forward to coming there and doing some training with you guys. And until then, we'll do some virtual training. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to do some expansion joint training with Will Seal with CDC. So they've been a great partner for us for years. I think the last time I was there, I think it was October or November, and we did a whole series on Secure Expert 430 with them. So it's been great. And I'll tell you, what's very popular whenever we come into the office, they have a really good snack area.
Yes, we do. And good thing you can't see me from the waist. You know, you can only, I put on some pounds to that.
Well, that sounds like a well-run company.
Yeah.
That's kind of our priority around here too.
Keep them happy, keep them going.
Exactly. So we've got some more information here. I just wanted to kind of touch on, of course, with you, your experience, and of course with CDC. You guys have been around for quite some time, and you have a lot of capabilities.
Yeah, we've been around since '73. Started out as more of an engineering and drafting company and evolved into consulting as well. I've been with CDC for 26 years. And I've been managing the field services, consulting and forensics for past 12, 13 years. Enjoy every minute of it. I love getting out there and looking at how we can help buildings and the problems that they might have, how to enhance them. You know, you all spoke earlier about water intrusion and problems you might have with air and water, and as well the aesthetics of it. You know, I love those photos. I don't love them, but I love seeing photos where you have the black from the neoprene gasket, you know, just taken away from the architectural features of the building with the grid and the or metal panels like on Bank of America. And you know, those old neoprene gaskets, you know, they weren't meant to last for, you know, 35 years. And now with the silicone products coming out, you don't have that risk.
Right. Well, I think some of the stuff that you mentioned, so there's 2 videos that you're in. I don't know if you know that you're in 2. There's one that talks about wet sealing versus gaskets, and then the other one featuring this project here, which I'll move to that slide just so you can start talking a little bit more about the details here. But you mentioned wet sealing. Are you a fan of wet sealing?
It has its place. Obviously, it's not for every job. You know, it relies so much on contractor capabilities and neatness, and then it also restricts you for glass replacement. So it does have its place. It's not. I'm not a big fan of it. On the Bank of America project, we actually got quotes from the contractors, the bidders, for both a wet seal and new gaskets on the outside. They were comparable. I mean, it wasn't a whole lot different. And with this being an interior glazed system, it just didn't make sense to wet seal it and then have to go on the outside of the building, drop the building, cut the wet seal to pull the glass and put new in. And there's a lot of cleanup that's involved with it.
A pretty intense project here. I think some of the statistics were it's 18,000 panes of glass.
Wow.
That's significant.
Yeah, if I remember right, Ken Krieger mentioned it was like 80 some miles of gasket.
Yep, 80 miles of gasket.
Yeah, that's exterior gasket only.
Wow, that's significant. So I did the quick math. 80 miles, obviously significant, you know, probably not for you when you go biking.
Well, it's a good morning.
It's a good morning. Good morning ride. 422,000 feet. So I think that just kind of makes you go, whoa. So a significant project here. I think a lot of the working together, obviously with the design engineering team at Tremco and working with Ken Krieger helped. I think there were some tweaks you guys had to do on some iterations with the poly wedge gasket.
Yeah, you know, obviously since Tremco had supplied the original gaskets for the system 30 some years ago, they had basically the profile of the preset sponge gasket. So we knew kind of basic dimensions of what we wanted a wedge gasket to do, to fit into. So we took that and Ken brought out some samples to try. And we basically, Ken and I sat out there and dug out old neoprene preset sponge gasket and tried it ourselves. We found the one that fit the best because, you know, like you mentioned earlier, you don't want it too loose. You don't want it to be falling out. You don't want it to let air in the building or out of the building. You want it to keep it watertight. So several iterations, we got it a good pressure, and it wasn't the pressure that would cause the glass to fail or, you know, squeeze out the polyisobutylene. It was several trials to get it right, but we got it right. Then once we ran, I guess, a trial footage, a trial set for the contractors to actually perform mock-ups with, when they ran it all the way across, it was bulging at the setting blocks. So the gasket would bulge up a little bit. So we went back to the drawing board and nipped that a little bit, and it clears the setting blocks so you don't have the little bulges. It worked out perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, there's up on the screen there, it shows that, you know, we replaced it after 35 years. Peter Poirier centered there in the middle. 36 years at Tremco, so 1 year in, he's working on this project, not bad. So
right.
pretty excited. Peter's original notes in, you know, the manila folders, stored them in Ashland, you know, so pretty unique story. And just that ability to work closely with the design engineering teams, do those tweaks. I think in Ken Krieger's words on this video, he talked about the angularity of the poly wedge and that it's dense enough. It's just at the right density, right? So that's where we kept saying unicorn, right? It's got to be dense enough that it's going to hold everything in place. Can't be too dense so it can't get in there. And it's so critical because if it's too dense, it could crack the glass, and you certainly don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and as well as cracking the glass, it can put so much pressure that the PIB squeezes out, and you don't want that. And then you get fog glass, and you got to replace glass. So yeah, it was very. I don't want to say intense because Ken did a great job and made it very easy back and forth to get the right fit.
Like Ken Krieger.
But
so,
you know, I'm sorry, the owners, they actually had a wet seal mock-up that was done on one of the terraces, I want to say back in like 2010. And we went up and looked at it, and Ken was with me, and we looked at it and we were like, yeah, I mean, they did a good job, but look at all the dirt that just attracted to the silicone around the glass, you know, so that wet seal attracts dirt.
Yeah, that was some of the things that he was noting was obviously it might not look good, right? It's going to attract dirt. It's then going to give wash off down the face of it. And then if you have work later on, it's harder to then have to put the rigging on the exterior, cut the wet sealant out versus being able to handle some glass replacement if need be. So in this instance, a lot of times when we think about gasket replacement, we think that the windows have to be removed. And in this case, you didn't need to.
No, that's correct. That's one of the reasons why we had the mock-up set up for the contractors that were bidding the work, is we wanted to see them remove the existing preset sponge gasket and see what kind of trouble they would have doing it, and so that they could provide a good, accurate fee structure for the work. So they did the mock-ups and found out that, you know, it's tricky, but it can be done. And so once the gasket is pulled out and removed all the way around, they can drive in the wedge. Now, it does have to be sequentially done so that you keep applying the pressure to the interior. You know, you don't want to just remove all the gasket all the way around and then have your pane of glass just able to move. You want to keep that pressured, so it's sequentially done.
Yeah, it's very cool. So lots of times Paul likes to ask, you know, what do you see next? What's the innovative thing that you'd like to see us focus on? Do you have something in mind, Brian?
Oh, innovative. Well, I know we're seeing an uptick in some of the overclads and feasibility studies for overclads, and that means glass and as well as the framing. I think one of the big things that Tremco provides is the overlay system, because as we know in the 80s, the structural gasket system is basically at its life end. You know, I mean, it's a neoprene product as well, and it's not going to last forever. So if it's performing structurally, and it needs to be enhanced as far as the air and water penetration, because the seals on them are probably shot, I still think that's a strong candidate right now.
So continuing to utilize that restoration overlay solution, going over that. So yeah, because a lot of times when we're looking at these gaskets, they either, like you said, they're leaking air and water, they're still structurally sound, and then they may not have a good bonding surface to even put sealant on. Now we're just going to go up and over. Great solution for that, for sure. So.
Yeah. And as well, you know, you have the I-beam curtain walls that were very popular in the 70s and 80s. Those rely heavily on the internal seals of the system, which was always a tricky part of the system. So once the exterior gaskets have kind of deteriorated, and maybe you're wet sealing or whatever, but as that lets more and more water into the system and the internal seals have failed over time, I think you might want to look into overlays over aluminum. And I know you have some, but I think some of those I-beam curtain walls will be a good candidate.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, this is some good advice.
Yeah, I like that. Well, Brian, I want to thank you for coming on here today and talking to us about this project. Looking forward to do some continued work with you via Ken Krieger, of course. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye. So Paul, pretty cool talking about that poly wedge gasket system.
Yeah, one of my favorite, always one of my favorite projects, that Bank of America story. Probably because we did the original.
I know, I mean, and I like that kind of, being able to have that sort of story, you know, to be able to go back, show how we did things way back then, and then utilize and show that technology difference, right, between then and now. 35 years.
Not bad.
35 years. So that's pretty amazing. So, you know what, Paul, we always like to kind of close off and talk to everybody about what's coming up next.
Yep.
So we are going to be talking all about sports arenas, stadiums, things like that, all in the month of October.
Yeah, you and I thought originally we might do it in one episode, and we looked at each other and said, by the time all the feedback came in, now it's a whole month.
Exactly, whole month. So have those ideas come in. So please keep continuing to submit them to us. I think we've got a couple high schools we're going to take a look at, and how we had a really cool Tremco CPG solution, incorporating a lot of different pieces and parts of that stadium. But then we can go huge too. We've got a lot of.
And make sure you capture where the work got done, and then they won a championship. And whereas before,
okay, I think I know exactly.
There was
what
no
you're talking
championship.
about.
So there's more than a few stories where they kind of had to get the building right, and then the team inside
got it right.
Got it right.
Got it right. I know exactly what we're talking about there. Well, once again, everybody, thank you for joining us. That rounds off our month of glazing, and as I mentioned, sports arena venues, month of October.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Be safe.